It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
When people think of science fiction, space, robots, and aliens usually come to mind. However, science fiction is much more than mythical beasts, nuclear explosions, and predicting the future. Science fiction usually deals with worlds that differ from our own as a result of new scientific discoveries, technologies, and social systems. It also finds a way to change our perspective, giving us a glimpse of what we may have missed. American cinema definitely has a large influence on our culture, and sci-fi films are no exception. Like any other genre, as time continues to pass, you can see what the hot topic of discussion was of its time. Le Voyage de la Lune, otherwise known as A Trip to the Moon in the 1920s, is considered to be the first sci-fi movie ever made. Though it borrowed heavily from H.G. Wells and Jules Verne, it was an original story that would set the stage for sci-fi over the next 20 years. In America, though, adventure and fantasy were the genre-focused themes. Pushing forward to the 30s and 40s, the Great Depression and World War II greatly affected the genre, and audiences started flocking to the theaters to see escapist films, along with classic monster pictures provided by Universal. In the 1950s, the first atomic bomb helped usher in what people consider the golden age of sci-fi. It's in this decade where we finally see some variety in this genre. With the fear of nuclear apocalypse, we get movies such as Godzilla, whereas Invasion of the Body Snatchers was a direct response to communist paranoia. As we move into the 1960s, the space race becomes a hot topic of discussion. However, it's the film 2001: Space Odyssey that would change the genre forever with its realistic space travel and broad scope of storytelling. When you couple that with the moon landing in 1969, there is a significant boom going into the 1970s. Space exploration and discovery took the movies by storm, and films such as Star Wars and Star Trek, the motion picture, took over the 70s. However, Watergate took the nation by storm, and with conspiracies and distress on the rise, this topic became a staple for science fiction. The decade ended on a high note, though, when Alien paved the way for sci-fi horror and visual stylings for years to come. In the 1980s, big-budget sci-fi flicks continued to flourish with the likes of RoboCop, Terminator, and Back to the Future. But with new technologies such as computers taking over people's homes, movies such as Tron would pave the way for studios to invest in computer graphics. With the birth of the internet and computers playing a major factor in everyday lives in the 1990s, computer animation began to grow in popularity with movies such as Jurassic Park and The Matrix. And when you couple that all in, it's great examples of how graphics were being used effectively, thus creating a large scale of epic blockbusters as the genre moved into the 2000s and today. Much like its predecessors, today's sci-fi continues to have a hand in the way we think and how we relate to some common social, political, and or self-issues. District 9 is a dark reminder of how cruel this world can be through racism and xenophobia. The film follows a character by the name of Wikus Vandermeer and his transformation as he removes aliens from an African township known as District 9. The agencies blatantly disregard any cultural differences and welfare as they carry out the task of removal. At one point, Wikus purposely aborts and helps lay fire to a shed of alien offsprings. Ironically enough, Wikus would come into contact with some of the aliens' fluid and slowly transform into a prawn himself, thus being shunned in society much like the prawns he tried to evacuate himself. If you want to raise questions about self-conscience and the mystery of human existence, look no further than Solaris. The movie often asks us to consider identity and to consider the idea that mankind will never be able to see anything other than mirrors. Though the mystery of Solaris can't be resolved, the characters are often left making choices in what they want to believe, often about their identity and about how they choose to view the universe. The movie Arrival is much more than a surprise ending and more about time and language. Throughout the film, we see what we believe to be flashbacks of a daughter who had died of some disease. Because of how the language of film works, we believe these to be flashbacks. But, as the end of the film reveals, those aren't flashbacks at all. They're memories, for lack of a better term, of the future, a future in which Banks and Donnelly will have a daughter whom they will watch die. Language, Banks says, is the cornerstone of civilization. You never understand this better than you do when considering first contact. You can't paint outside the borders. Instead, you have to figure out a way to paint both within and between them. That's Banks' problem, though. It's also the movies as well. Apart from means of interpretation and expression, what does language represent exactly? Is it a byproduct of the human mind or the integral mind to itself? To date, Black Panther might be one of the more inspiring Marvel films ever created. The movie itself confronts relevant problems that are not only to America or Africa, but also the entire world. Black Panther also spotlights strong female characters that serve as T'Challa's main advisors and warriors throughout the movie. These also include his love interest and Wakandan undercover spy Nakia, and T'Challa's tech-savvy sister Shuri. Overall though, the biggest takeaway message that Black Panther brings is political. It does promote global cooperation. While Africa is typically thought to contain only third world countries, Wakanda is rich in technological advancement and resources, as we see T'Challa make big choices regarding his country's safety and world unity. Though the world of science fiction can be exciting and incredibly complex, the genre can be divided into dozens of subgenres, each with their own unique themes and attributes. Parallel universe, or alternate reality in science fiction and fantasy, is a self-contained separate reality coexisting with our own. This separate reality can range in size from a small geographic region to an entire new universe. While the terms parallel universe and alternate reality are generally synonymous and can be used interchangeably in most cases, there is sometimes an additional connotation implied with the term alternate reality that implies that the reality is a variant of our own, whereas the term parallel universe is more general without any connotations implying a relationship or lack thereof with our own universe. In the movie The Butterfly Effect, the plot follows 4 people in their childhoods and also their adulthoods. One of the main characters is played by Ashton Kutcher, who finds out that he can travel through time in order to fix and change his past through his childhood diary.
Why don't you go back in time and save Mrs. Halpern and her baby? And then maybe Lenny wouldn't freak out and ruin my family. No, go back to when I'm 7 and fuck me in front of my daddy's video camera. Straighten me out a bit.
The main idea of the film is that everything we do affects the future's consequences, even the smallest parts. Both psychological and oppressive narrative presents why everything we do must never be changed, and the idea of time traveling is not always good. Throughout the film, things seem to never go right and we see multiple timelines. Everything is inevitable and we determine our fate in the future. The hit show Stranger Things on Netflix is more than just a 1980s throwback. The show centers on a group of kids who are trying to solve a string of mysterious disappearances in their small town, but they soon realize that not all is what it seems. In fact, the kids soon realize that the spooky occurrences may actually be stemming from interactions with an alternate world. Imagine a world exactly like our own, but distorted by time and space. This is, in essence, the Upside Down world. Another dimension that is presented to us as a membrane-dripping, shadowy version of the world we know and inhabit. After Will goes missing, Mike, Dustin, and Lucas use noble metaphors to try and explain the unexplainable. Mike, Dustin, and Lucas would eventually prod their science teacher, Mr. Clark, for a possible explanation of the Upside Down world, and uses a simple but confusing analogy.
Picture an acrobat standing on a tightrope. Now the tightrope is our dimension, and our dimension has rules. You can move forwards or backwards. But what if, right next to our acrobat, there is a flea? Now the flea can also travel back and forth, just like the acrobat, right?
Right. Yeah.
Here's where things get really interesting. The flea can also travel this way, along the side of the rope. He can even go underneath the rope.
Upside down.
Exactly.
So why does this world exist? Perhaps we'll never know, but in reality, there are multiple theories about the possible existence of other universes, and none really come close to explaining the Upside Down. In the film Donnie Darko, Jake Gyllenhaal plays a troubled teenager who has a vision of a 6-foot-tall man dressed in a rabbit costume that manipulates him and makes him commit a series of crimes, all while telling him that the world will end in 28 days. During the film, we see the events that evolve around Donnie and his struggle in life. We share the same hallucinations as him, and by the time the film ends, there are many questions left unanswered, as it is hard to see what is real and what is a part of Donnie's imagination, as it's hardly related to things we see in reality, but also questions the reality and the existence of some kind of paranormal and parallel universe that determines our fate. Though the ending may be left to interpretation, Inception is about a thief who steals corporate secrets through use of dream-sharing technology and is given the inverse task of planting an idea into the mind of a CEO. Though this is the main plot of the film, the interesting thing is that it discusses the ideas of dreams, to the point where entering one's dream is an adventure, an experience to discover something new, even though it is possible to get stuck there.
So how did we end up here?
Well, we just came from the,
Think about it, Ariadne. How did you get here? Where are you right now?
We're dreaming?
You're actually in the middle of the workshop right now, sleeping. This is your first lesson in shared dreaming. Stay calm.
So why are these films so popular today? Maybe it's the fact that more often than not, science fiction has become more and more relatable to a wider range of audience through its use of effective storytelling and touching on topics such as race, parallel universes, political ideas, and terrorism. Maybe it's the fact that audiences get a first glimpse at the future through technological advances, or it could be that they no longer have to see a cheesy costume come across their television through the use of sophisticated CGI. So what is happening in contemporary society to warrant these changes? Technological advances and social issues such as war, climate change, and race continue to be a hot topic of discussion. It's just that science fiction usually has their ways of confronting the problems of the present by either assuming that the existing trend will continue or by recasting them in a clearer language, oftentimes thanks to a change of perspective. It's through this method as to why science fiction serves a greater role to society than just escapism. Oftentimes than not, science fiction has a great way of making us think and asking ourselves what if and why. It also allows the individual watching the film to examine the role we ourselves play in equality and how we treat each other. It also causes us to look ahead and ask ourselves, is this how we truly want to end up? When you watch films such as District 9 and Black Panther, it's a great reminder of how far society has come and how much further we need to go in regards to society, technology, and the power that comes with it. When making District 9, writer and director Neil Blomkamp wasn't that far off in his tale about the integration of aliens into human culture. The xenophobic attitudes towards the prawns came from real-life attitudes some South Americans showed the Zimbabwe refugees who came to that country for a better life, and reminders of World War II reared its ugly head when Christopher discovered the aliens being subject to unethical experimentation. However, Black Panther shows a futuristic society that puts the top nations decades behind them. Of course, with great power comes great responsibility, as T'Challa often struggles with the ways of the past while deciding what kind of king he truly wants to be. Ironically enough, he doesn't start building a bridge with the rest of the world until Killmonger successfully defeats him and realizes that Eric only wants to use Wakanda's resources for his people that are being depressed through destruction and power. So what connects all these films? Whether it was the ideology of concentration camps in District 9, political power in Black Panther, language barriers in Arrival, or the nature of being in Solaris, they all relate to some form of social conflict in modern society. The funny thing is, the syntax within all these films introduces problems that hasn't either been solved or is being solved. They attempt to solve the problem but show the side effects of the solution, rectify the problem the solution caused, show us cool technology, and leave us happy whether we like it or not. The genre of science fiction has definitely shown itself as an outlet for predicting the future. As technology grows more and more, so will the feel of realistic CGI by creating a whole new cinematic world for us to explore. But if you watch and read enough sci-fi from different eras, you might notice a generational difference in how we told these stories. Science fiction from the golden age of the 50s and 60s seemed to have an optimistic angle on the future, whereas more recent sci-fi seems to be a little more dystopia and bleak. So what do these changes reveal about science fiction and parallel worlds in contemporary society? Look, we live in a world where technology, climate, and society are continuously changing. Many things that were once a dream have now become a reality. We have been to the moon, created clones, and have a world of knowledge that fits into our pockets. As the world changes, so does sci-fi. However, sci-fi is typically at the forefront of technology and modern-day issues. By continuing to be the leader in discussing the world's problems, sci-fi will always capture an audience's attention and cause them to question the world around them. That's why parallel universes can be so exciting. Not so much what you see on Stranger Things or Back to the Future 2, but the possibilities that there could be a whole other world right beside us is certainly intriguing, especially when you think about the fact that we dream of these worlds to escape our own realities. However, what if they weren't dreams? What if your dreams were a gateway to another dimension that you're living? Does that mean everyone around you are living in the same parallel universe? Only time will tell if there is such a thing. One thing's for sure, let's fix what's going on in this universe before we jump into the upside down.